way you do the things you do. Alright, the way you do the things you do.
Well, with homework, screen time, social media, sports, projects, deadlines, volunteer hours. Did I mention homework? The anxieties students face seem to be increasing with each new school year. Joining us to talk about this tonight is the director of the Wernham West Centre for Learning, Catherine Barnes. Welcome to What She Said.
Thank you for having me.
So, education experts at Upper Canada College, UCC, have developed a school-wide program to help students manage the ever-increasing pressures they deal with each day at school and in life. So tell us about it.
That's right. So the Centre for Learning at Upper Canada College is an integral part of the school, and we offer programs for students kindergarten through grade 12. And our purpose is really to provide academic support, but also to teach students and work with teachers on explicit teaching of learning strategies. And what we're finding is that students who have a lot of stress or feel stress and the academic pressures often sometimes have areas in their executive functionings and need a little bit of support in terms of understanding how to organize their time, balance their workload, initiate their workload. So getting started on their homework is often a challenge for those students. Just it's an avoidance strategy often when they're feeling overwhelmed and stressed. Mm-hmm. They also sometimes need some support just in terms of that emotional recognition and that cognitive flexibility in terms of thinking about their schoolwork. And so really our role at the center is to work with teachers and really to scaffold these skills, kindergarten all the way through till our grade 12 or our year 12 students, so that they really know how to manage the stress and how to manage the workload. And when they understand how to manage and cope with the workload, we find the stress is reduced.
Okay, I just want to clarify something. Are you saying that you are teaching the learning strategies starting at kindergarten, grade 1, or that stress is actually starting at kindergarten and grade 1?
You know, it sometimes can be a bit of both. I would say it's a different type of stress that we see in kindergarten. We definitely are teaching learning strategies the minute students walk in our building, and actually parents are teaching strategies to their students before they even come into the building, and they don't even realize that sometimes. But we have seen a rise of stress, and we have seen a rise of anxiety in children and youth. That's well documented in the media. We see it more in our upper school. We see it more with our students as the academic pressures and the workload and everything that you mentioned before tends to start piling up for them. But we do see stress and anxiety in children as young as in our kindergarten group.
So another major factor, I would assume, because it certainly wasn't around in my day, but for students is constantly being distracted by their devices. Do you discuss those kind of techniques?
Yes, we do, in great detail, actually. You know, the thing with technology is there's kind of a war out there right now on technology in schools. And should we be allowing students to have technology? Should we be removing them from the classroom? Are they too much of a distractor? The reality with technology is it's not going away. And so what we need to do is we need to teach our students implicitly how to actually manage the technology. They need to be taught how to avoid distractions, how to use it as a tool and not a toy. And so these are some of the things that we really work with our students on. And we start scaffolding those skills really early on. We're a one-to-one school, and so all of our students have access to a device. Mm-hmm. And when we introduce those devices, we really make sure that we're implicitly teaching them how to use the calendar feature, how to set up documents, how to organize their laptop or their device, just like we would have done 10, 20 years ago with a binder.
One of the things you mentioned before was the basics of time management. So what are we getting wrong? What needs to change there?
I don't think we're getting it wrong per se. I think sometimes we just assume kids know how to do it.
Okay.
I think often parents just assume that at a certain age, kids will just be able to manage their time and figure out how to study. And what we now know about the brain and with brain science is that our executive functioning skills, which I mentioned at the beginning, are those skills that develop in the front part of the brain: organization, time management, cognitive flexibility, self-regulation, working memory. They actually don't start to develop until the age of 12. And for boys, they don't consolidate till 25. And so we assume...
I laugh, but that doesn't surprise me.
I know. I always get a really good chuckle from parents when I have that conversation. But the reality is they haven't consolidated them. So we're assuming these high school students know how to do all of this, and we're just not teaching those skills and those strategies. And so at Upper Canada College, we're really implicit through our approaches to teaching and learning about really scaffolding these skills and making sure we're targeting them even with our high school students. We're not just assuming they know how to do it.
Okay, so around the age of 12, that's what, grade 6, 7?
About grade 6.
So you start to emphasize the pillars of learning. So initiation, flexibility, attentiveness, organization, and planning. attentiveness, that is that in relation to the distractions that we were
Yeah,
talking about?
it's about how do you sustain your attention? So how do you manage yourself? How do you self-regulate? And that's what these executive functionings do. They really are a strategy or a part of the brain that helps us sort of manage our day and manage our thinking. And so that sustained attention is really about when something's not interesting to you or when you're distracted by everything, how do you bring yourself back? How do you regulate within the class? How do you focus?
You taught science and physical health, right?
I did. That's right.
Two independent schools in the Greater Ontario, Toronto area, and you've joined the team at UCC 6 years ago.
That's right.
So, what do you find it's like in a classroom when everyone has an iPhone or an iPad or is a connected classroom?
I think it's wonderful. I really have to tell you, the rich learning that can go on when technology is in the room is extraordinary. For some students that struggle, it's also the way that they can access the curriculum that other students haven't been able to do in the past by having technology read out loud, highlight features. You can click on a word instantaneously and get a definition. You can co-construct with students using a live Google Doc. I mean, technology is absolutely fabulous in the school system, and it really opens the door and to so much inquiry-based instruction. It's really fantastic. But when you introduce something like that, it really is important for teachers and for parents and all of us to be really mindful. We still need to teach how to use it. We can't assume. I mean, kids are great with technology. They're great with iPads, but it doesn't necessarily translate into using a Google Doc, into managing it as a tool and not a toy.
Yeah, but it can also be a huge stressor. I have people that I know who, if the email, they have to check the email. It's like a Pavlov dog response, right? They have to check the email. They can't ignore it, and it has to be answered right then. Well, no, it doesn't. It doesn't have to be answered right then. But I've noticed that it's very generational. I can ignore an email. And then again, my daughters can. It's like I didn't check my email. They'll check their messages, but their email seems to be a different level. It's like they will message me to tell me that they've sent me an email. It's like, I know because it all pops up at the same time. But if somebody has that Pavlov's dog response to the bell of an email going off, and it starts developing in their youth, that must be an incredible stressor.
It is. And we do see that with students. And really, we're very mindful of that. I'm not a healthcare professional. If it gets to that point, obviously, we'd want to make sure our students see whoever they need. If it's becoming a point where we're worried about sort of a gaming addiction or we're worried about that stress and anxiety being unhealthy stress and really needing to seek professional advice, we would make sure that those students get access to that. What we would do to support that student is it's really about trying to teach them boundaries and setting goals and working towards those goals. And so it's really important for us to be honestly having those dialogues with those students and really talking about how can we break this down for you? What can we do? And some of our students have been, great about even blocking apps. They recognize it, they're self-aware. So in exam time, they block apps or they print things off and they don't use their technology.
So what's one of the learning techniques you can tell us about that you've been finding really beneficial?
It's good old-fashioned calendaring and planning. Really, we forget sometimes that at the end of the day, when you're feeling overwhelmed, when you have a lot on your plate, the most important thing to do is break that down and plan out your week in small chunks. When you do things in small chunks, it's not nearly as overwhelming. It's easier to get started. And then you've actually got a plan on how you can complete it. So it doesn't look like this overwhelming beast that you're never going to be able to do.
I'm very old-fashioned. I keep a list, a pad on my kitchen
Exactly.
calendar. I write down the list, and I enjoy crossing things off. And then it gets smaller and smaller, and then I have to start a new page.
Exactly. And it's the same thing now. Kids sometimes like using sticky notes or reminders on their devices instead. But it's really at the end of the day, chunking and calendaring and breaking things down into small chunks.
Now, is it possible for parents that aren't connected with UCC to find out about some of these techniques or get?
Absolutely. There's tons of research out there. The first thing I always say to parents that are connected to Upper Canada College is talk to your school's teachers. Talk to your school. Most schools do have a lot of this information readily available to them. And really, there's so many great resources out on the web to really talk about strategies to support students. The Learning Disabilities Association, ADLD at school, there's tons of resources out there, but start with your school.
Right, and these fundamental executive functions set them up for success not only at school but in life overall.
It does, absolutely.
Catherine Barnes, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your tips for students and parents tonight.
Thanks very much for having me.
This is What She Said. We'll be right back.